Okay, folks. Not only are they going to start monitoring the, I guess, I don't know, the regular Muslim communities that came from, I guess, Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq. Now they're going to start monitoring the Somali communities, principal of which are located in Minneapolis and in the Columbus, Ohio area. I really want you to listen to exactly what these guys are saying.
Now, New York Congressman Peter King, a Republican and member of the Homeland Security and Intelligence Committees, along with Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer, a CIA-trained intel operative and senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research. Great to see you both. Congressman, let me start with you. Do you believe this is terror?
I believe there's all the indicators of terrorism, and I would be surprised if it's not. Obviously, we can't make a final conclusion, but everything is there. A Somali refugee, the type of attack, hitting people with his vehicle, using a knife. This coming shortly after the president announced that Al-Shabaab, which is based in Somalia, is going to be declared a terrorist organization. Right after ISIS encouraged people to use vehicles to crash into crowds and to use knives as a weapon as opposed to a gun. So all the indicators are there. Again, if I had to bet, I'd say yes. And there's been a real problem with the Somali community as far as having a large number of Al-Shabaab supporters.
How does that change this then, Congressman? If that's the way things are leaning, and even your Democratic counterpart is suggesting that they believe this is terror, that this has the hallmarks of terrorism, how does that change the investigation right now?
Well, the FBI will be coming in, Homeland Security. This will be focused as a certainly a real possibility of terrorism. I'll also be looking for any type of overseas link to see if there's any connections here in the United States. You have Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Columbus, Ohio, are the two cities, the two areas that have the highest concentration of Somalis. And we've had, I believe, up to 40 Somali Americans have gone over to Somalia to fight as ISIS terrorists. So this is a real threat. It's a real danger. And again, it's a community where the overwhelming majority are good people, but there's a hardcore within it. When I had my hearings on Islamist terrorism 5.5 years ago, the first witness we had focused on the threat we have from Somali Americans.
Now, let me get this straight. You had hearings 5 years ago stating that we needed to focus on the Somali terrorist threat. Now, I could be wrong, but I think this is the first time that a Somali has been linked to any type of a potential terrorist action here in America. I think this is the first time, and again, like I said, I could be wrong. You made mention of 40 Somalis going over to fight overseas. Would be kind of helpful if you could tell me how many total Americans had gone over to fight for ISIS or any of the other terrorist groups, so that we could put the level of Somali participation into context. Unfortunately, I guess that wasn't a question that Megyn Kelly decided to ask. So for one guy, all of a sudden, you guys are going to jump up and down and start talking about hardcore cells within the Somali community, okay? How about for 3 guys that did that bombing in Oklahoma City? Why didn't you basically go after all of the hardcore white supremacists rolling around the country, and in particular the Ku Klux Klan, which everybody knows is a white supremacist group, but they're allowed to operate and to flourish? I don't know, double standard maybe?
Lieutenant Colonel Schaefer?
Yes.
So now there will be an investigation into this, and a question about whether this guy was, you know, so-called self-radicalized, whether he has connections to ISIS overseas. Your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I think we have to look at the training of this individual, his history. We know, Megan, that terrorists are basically groomed from 11 years old on. We have to look at a pattern of criminal behavior. These folks are actually kind of put into that pipeline, and frankly, as the congressman was saying, you know, you have a hardcore within these communities. This is not remote. This is not just.
Now, let me stop this guy right there. Okay, let's just, because Fox loves having people come out there and say maybe and possibly, and we have to look into because he could have been doing this, that, and the other. Okay, number one, this guy had an absolutely spotless record, okay? He had no run-ins with the law. He had just graduated high school. All the indications were that he was a happy kid when he graduated high school. So this basically appears to have occurred over, whatever happened occurred over a brief period of time. So as far as quote unquote all this training that you have to look into, nah, I don't think so. All right, so you're denigrating the guy without the benefit of specifically laying out the guy's history. Number two, it has been reported that he did look on a couple of websites, okay? It also was reported that he was upset about the treatment of Muslims in this country, okay? But hey, I'm upset about the treatments of blacks in this country. Does that make me a terrorist? I don't believe it made him one either. When this story first went down, I basically thought that this kid basically just snapped. That's kind of what I thought. As far as it being a terrorist act, anything can be considered a terrorist act if you look hard enough and want to put together enough stuff to make your case. I think the kid snapped. He jumps out of the car with a butcher knife, not even a machete, but a butcher knife. Come on. Now, you can link that to ISIS calling for attacks all over the world and to attack with knives. Yeah, you can, if you want to put that together, yeah, fine. My opinion, the kid snapped, and that's just that.
Columbus, it's not just Ohio, it is other places. Canada has had problems with this, as well as Minneapolis. So we have to look at the whole, and frankly, this is a pattern. As Peter was pointing out, ISIS has put out training videos. So the bottom line here is this was an act of terror by everyone's definition.
Now, okay, they checked the kid's computer, and he had not reviewed any ISIS terrorist tactical films or any ISIS training films. We found that out already. So again, they're throwing out idle conjecture about this kid being involved in ISIS, and there is no hard proof that the kid was radicalized by ISIS at this moment.
I think we have to accept at this point in time there are cells here. These folks are here functioning hidden within these larger communities.
Where is your proof that there are cells here? This could have been, and more than likely was, if it was a terrorist attack, and I don't really believe that it was, this was a lone wolf. Now all of a sudden you're expanding one person out, now all of a sudden he's a cell. If he was a cell, where were the other attackers? Fox loves doing this. They throw out a whole lot of maybes and supposes and possiblies, and they have no basis in fact. But they serve to throw red meat to their audience and rile up their crowds.
And Donald Trump, Mr. Trump, and his team have got to go two ways on this. They're going to have to go and look at those who are already here regarding the fact that the door has been open. Governor Kasich has accepted an extraordinary number of folks, of Somalis, into Ohio. He now has to accept the responsibility of allowing some, like this individual, to have been let in and killed attempted to kill Americans. Secondly, we have to do a deeper screening of people coming in. We know the reference communities these folks come from, and as Peter said, Al-Shabaab is a terrorist organization. People go to Somalia and they get radicalized, they get trained, they come back. We had this issue right after 9/11. We were dealing with the Somalis who were being radicalized back in the early 2000s. We had a very effective way of dealing with that, combined with the military and law enforcement. And frankly, Megan, those mechanisms don't now exist to prevent this from happening. Remember, this did not happen after 9/11 because we took aggressive measures to protect the American people.
Well, but of course, right, of course. But the question was whether we overstepped our bounds when it comes to people's civil liberties, and it depends on where the country is in terms of a war footing or whether the people people are extraordinarily scared. And you've both lived through that, Congressman Peter King, you especially, as a congressman from Long Island, and having known many of the victims on 9/11. But
Let me stop it right there. Yeah, so now this guy is all gung-ho about running down the Somalis. And he just stated that they did all kinds of stuff after 9/11, and they basically were targeting the Somalis, okay? Where were all the Somali cells? Where were the arrests, okay, of these Somali people that were already in the country? Okay, where were the trials for all of these so-called supporters of, you can't even say it's Iraq, because the actual people that did this shit were people from Saudi Arabia. But where were all the Somali terrorists that you guys captured? See, this is all the bullshit that they want to throw out there to make you think that the Somali people have been a long-term problem and they've been on top of it. If they were so on top of it, okay, this wouldn't have happened. But now he's going to fall back and say, oh, we don't have the same ability. Yeah, because then they found out that you were violating all kinds of civil rights all over the place. You know, you guys got shut down. Idle conjecture, Fox does it again.
the question is, how far could we go? Because as far as we know, so far this guy had not been on the radar. There was no reason to question whether he might be a terrorist. And so this could be one of the needle in the haystack type situations where the FBI can't really racially profile or religiously profile every Somali who comes into the country.
No, but it is important to have sources and informers within the community. I do believe you have to have surveillance. You have to know who's who to the extent you can. We're not talking about wiretapping. We're not talking about any Fourth Amendment violations. But to me, it is important, just as when you went after organized crime, you go to the communities where the crime is coming from. 99% of the people could be law-abiding, but if you know the crime is coming from there, if you know the terrorist act is going to come from that community, you have to have more surveillance. I think it's legitimate law enforcement and absolutely necessary.
So you're going to use this one quote-unquote terrorist act, which you don't even know that it was. I don't believe that it was. You're going to use this one act to dive headlong into the Somali communities, not only in Columbus, Ohio, but up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And you're going to justify all of that activity for this one guy. Okay, thank you very much, Peter King.
Great to see you both. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
All right, and now she's going to have an even, Peter King pretty much is fairly level-headed. I don't agree with him a lot of the times, but in my opinion, he's fairly level-headed. This other guy was a jerk. Now you're going to get an even bigger jerk coming on.
You.
Megan.
Well, as we await more information on the motivation behind this attack, the possible link to terrorism is raising new questions about how national security threats will be dealt with under a Donald Trump presidency. For more on that, we're joined by Pete Hoekstra, former Michigan congressman and an informal advisor to the president-elect.
Now, again, I'm just letting you know, this guy is a total asshole, and he basically is not going to say damn near anything, specifically when she asked him questions about what would Trump do domestically. But just check out her questions and his answers.
Good to see you tonight. So let's start there. How do you see things changing? This is the first possible terror attack we have seen since Donald Trump was elected as our next president. How do you see him changing the landscape that President Obama has put into place when it comes to fighting terror?
Well, I think the first thing that you're going to see is you're going to see a President Donald Trump along with his national security advisor and defense team is they're going to be much more aggressive overseas. They are not going to allow ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Al-Shabaab or these terrorist organizations to have safe havens in 5 different countries. There's a caliphate that was basically the size of Indiana in Iraq and Syria.
So basically what he just said is that Donald Trump, who wants to pull back away from the world as far as fighting wars all over the place. What he just said is that Donald Trump wants and is going to invade, by some manner, invade, bomb, whatever, 5 different countries. So I guess we're talking about Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, And I guess the fifth country obviously is going to escape me unless he's talking about Somalia.
Failed states, Iraq and Syria. Libya is a failed state. Yemen's
Well,
a
let me
failed
just stop
state.
you there. Let me just stop you there so you can get specific.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the fifth one, Yemen, so it wasn't Somalia. But they just got through talking about the problems with the Somalians that are over here in the United States. But Somalia is not even one of the countries they're going to go into. They're going to go into Yemen? Yeah, right.
Get specific,
Yes.
because President Obama did fight ISIS to some extent late in the game, and they've lost a bunch of territory in Iraq, as you know. But Donald Trump he's largely non-interventionalist. As he put it, I'm the one who wants to keep us out of these wars. So what specifically do you see him doing overseas to control ISIS? Because thus far he said he has a plan, but he hasn't revealed it.
Well, number one, you have to recognize President Obama created this situation. When he came into office, there was,
No, actually, the one that created the situation was George Bush when he initially invaded Iraq, and instead of going after the people who actually did this, which was the Saudis, there were 5 Saudi citizens that did 9/11, not anybody in Iraq. George Bush was just pissed off because the people in Iraq had threatened his father, so he was looking for any excuse under the sun in order to go after the Iraqis.
Iraq was a relatively stable state. Syria was a stable state. Libya was.
Yep.
I mean, this president created the circumstances where these countries, where Gaddafi, Assad, and others were keeping the lid on the garbage can of radical jihadists, he lifted
Right.
the lid off by getting rid of
Now here we
Gaddafi.
are at almost 2017. So what is President Trump going to do?
Well, what the president-elect has made clear, like I said, he's not going to allow these failed states to exist, and he will partner with people in the region. This current president, Obama, has been reluctant to equip and train the Kurds, to train and equip these tribes in Iraq.
Let me stop this asshole right there. There's a reason why Obama hasn't actually trained, well, actually they have trained, but supplied the Kurds with the weapons they need in order to kick some serious ass. The reason is Turkey. Turkey has fought the United States tooth and nail about arming the Kurds because Turkey thinks that once those Kurds get armed, that they're going to turn around and come back up into Turkey and fight against them. So if Dumb Donald turns around and arms the Kurds, he's going to lose Turkey as an ally. And actually, Turkey is a NATO ally, so that's going to create all kinds of problems. So it's not just snap your fingers. Now, the other thing is, we have gone down this road before as far as arming the various tribes or whatever within various countries. You don't believe me? Check into John McCain's history of supporting various tribes, and then we armed them, and then it turned out that they were our enemies as well. So it's not a simple matter to turn around and arm a bunch of tribes that are located within the region. You have to know exactly who you're arming. So you just said 2 things that are asinine, but you're not done.
To defeat ISIS in Iraq, he would not have taken out Gaddafi. And yeah, he has to develop a strategy to go back in and allow a stable government to come back into place in Libya and in Syria. And it's a very deep hole for this president to dig out of.
Now, that was the third dumb thing he said, that he wouldn't have taken out Gaddafi, which I agree. They should have left all these guys alone and let them work out their own problems. But as far as taking out Gaddafi, the whole world was for taking out Gaddafi because Gaddafi was killing his own people. And at the last count, before they actually went in there to go after him, he had killed about 200,000 of his own people. So the whole world was clamoring about doing something about Gaddafi. So, that's another statement where you're full of shit. The problem that Obama had is he didn't think what was going to happen the day after he got Gaddafi and all of those other guys. Wasn't thinking.
Second second thing,
I'm
Megan,
short
that
on
he will
time, so
not do
but
is
I
he
gotta
will
ask you
not.
domestically.
Yeah.
I'm short on time, but I gotta have to ask you domestically what you
Okay.
see President Trump, Donald Trump do.
Extremism where he equates every threat potentially in the United States as having the same priority. Donald Trump will focus on the threat from radical jihadism because that is the most significant threat that we face today, and he will start doing some of the things that Peter King has outlined in terms of surveillance and police activities against this very, very specific threat, and it will be a priority.
Surveil Muslim communities?
He will surveil those groups that he believes are the threat, and those are the groups that are linked to radical jihadist tendencies and radical jihadist philosophies, and they are linked to the Muslim Brotherhood.
So, translation, he's going to surveil all of the Muslim communities, and not just the Somalis, but all of the communities, based on what this asshole is saying. Whew, we got problems, folks. We got a lot of problems, and it's just going to get nothing but worse.